I felt angry and ashamed. I didn't deal with it particularly well.
I didn't know that that would be taboo to talk about.
What's going on, everyone? Welcome to the Behavioral Arts. My name is Spidey and I use my degree in sociology and psychology, my certifications in body language analysis and criminal interrogation, and over 10 years experience as an award-winning mentalist to teach people behavioral analysis and practical psychology on stages and television shows all over the world. This week, we are continuing our journey into the Netflix documentary Harry and Meghan, and we are more specifically looking at episodes 3 and 4, where we get quite deeper into their story and how it evolved. But what do their body language, facial expressions, and word choice reveal? And why are we getting a very different version of Prince Harry in episode 4 than what we're used to? Now, if you haven't seen part 1, where I looked at episodes 1 and 2, don't worry about it. There isn't really any continuity. I will treat each of these scenes like a new piece of information. I might reference back every now and then, but overall, you can absolutely start with this video. That being said, let's dive right in, starting with this.
Do you have that sense that the combination of the two of you, your different backgrounds, that you represent something new for the royal family?
No, we're a fantastic team. We know we are, and we hope to, over time, try and have as much impact for all the things that we care about as much as possible.
I am very excited about that, yeah.
Okay, so quite a lot going on there right in the beginning. Now, to be clear, that footage is not current. In the documentary, they reference back to when they announced their engagement, and they go back and show this footage, but I just couldn't ignore something that has this much body language going on. So the interviewer is asking if they believe that they represent something new as a couple for the royal family. And before he answers, before she's even done asking the question, we see two very distinct things on Prince Harry's face. One of them is he's looking off into the distance, and the other one is lip compression. So we see his lips thin out. Now, usually lip compression is consistent with either disagreement or withheld opinion. So notice how sometimes you're in a conversation and someone might be saying something and you have a thought, but you're not sure you want to express it because, I don't know, it might start something, or you disagree with what they're saying. You might have one of these things. Literally, we're just trying to shut the door so nothing will come out. So I think what's happening here is that gaze into the distance, he's selecting his words, he's choosing his words, and he's thinning out his lips as though to say, no, don't say that. So I think there's almost something he wants to say, but he's holding it back and trying to formulate the right answer. Then we see a bunch more things that convince me that he's thinking of the right answer to say here, as opposed to just saying the first thing that came into his mind. And here's what they are. The first is, so he starts his answer with that audible Now, we call these verbal leaks, but it can also just be referred to as audible hesitation. And typically they just buy us an extra second to put our words together, get our thoughts together. So or just helps us, gives us a sec to collect our thoughts. Then we see a really quick lip lick. He licks his lips. Now, lip licking is a very common indicator of stress. When we're stressed, our mouth dries out and we lick our lips subconsciously to try to correct that. It also helps us groom because it brings more color to the lips and makes us seem more presentable. So we see this behavior a lot more in stressed individuals. Then we see that stammering, that stuttering right in the beginning, which we refer to as speech disfluency, when the speech falls apart a little bit because he starts by saying, where, and he repeats it 3 times.
We're a fantastic team.
And this is very common for Prince Harry when he's hesitating or thinking of the right words. It's crazy how in moments of confidence, he'll pause and he'll speak slowly, but when he's feeling that stress, we commonly hear this stammering in his speech, and we're seeing it right here. Then we have something pretty significant, and it's a non-answer statement. And this is something we pay a lot of attention to in behavioral analysis. Whether it's in interviews or in interrogations, whenever an answer is provided, we ask ourselves, did that answer my question, and did it answer my entire question? And in this case, not really, because the interviewer asks, do you represent something new? And he throws in a quick no, almost forgettable, almost like he's just trying to get past that. But then he spends a heck of a lot more time focused on them as a couple being a fantastic team. We know we are. We don't need anyone else to tell us because we know we're a fantastic team. So it's a little bit of self-reassurance there. And then he talks about the impact that they want to make, but he doesn't really address the question as to whether they represent something new for the royalty. And finally, we're seeing something with the nonverbal communication that is going to put this all together for me and give me the answer as to what's probably going on in Prince Harry's head. And that's the fact that right at the beginning of his answer, right at the end of his answer, and several times in between, we see confirmation glances. He looks over to Meghan as he's answering a lot throughout this. Confirmation glances are really fascinating to spot in the real world, and the research on them very much contradicts a very popular myth in body language. So a lot of people think that liars avert eye contact, like they can't look you in the eyes. In fact, I get this in my comments all the time. I hear it out there all the time, people saying that, oh, when I'm talking to someone, they break eye contact. That's how I know that they're lying. Now, besides the fact that there isn't a single behavioral cue that can allow you to know for a fact when someone's lying, this particular one is the opposite of true, because extensive research from Samantha Mann determined that in a lot of cases, liars will actually increase eye contact because they want to know if their lie is working. They want to make sure that you're buying their story. And this is what confirmation glances are related to. Confirmation glances often, when we're talking to someone, are quick bursts for them to check and see if you're buying their story. So they might be talking and you might all of a sudden get this quick glance over. They're kind of checking in with you. But confirmation glances take a whole new meaning when we're interviewing two or more people. And this is something we see extremely commonly, believe it or not, in parenting or in schools. And those of you who work in education or those of you who have children, you're going to know exactly what I'm talking about in just a second. It's when we're talking to two or more people and we ask a question, and before they answer, they quickly just kind of look over to each other, and then they start answering, and during their answer they might kind of look again, and it's got one meaning. It's they want to make sure that their story is together. So they're looking over to make sure that the other person is following and is on the same page so that we present the same narrative. In fact, all these behaviors are very consistent with that. So I think what's happening here is the interviewer is asking a question about representing something new, and Prince Harry knows that it could get controversial, and he wants to avoid that. So he very quickly answers the question. Then with this non-answer where he completely sidetracks into something else, he just tries to get off that topic. So that's why we're seeing the hesitation, we're seeing the lip licking, he's stressed about this, we're seeing that stammering with the where, and then he's changing the subject entirely, and throughout, he keeps checking in with her to make sure, okay, we're on the same page, please stick with me on this, I don't want this to get controversial.
I never saw pictures or videos of a walkabout. It's like, what's a walkabout?
I could talk her through as much as I knew from my own experience and what I'd seen, but the piece I really didn't know about was the style, right? And what a woman how they needed to dress and all that sort of stuff.
In last week's video, we talked about how Meghan often says that she didn't know what certain things were or how to act in certain situations, like when she first met Prince William and Princess Catherine, when she first met the Queen. Now, I'm sure that a lot of my viewers by now have gathered that I'm a huge fan of Harry Potter. And there's a quote in Harry Potter that keeps coming to mind every time she says that.
That help will always be given at Hogwarts to those who ask for it.
Right? I feel like it's so fitting. Just replace the word Hogwarts by Buckingham Palace, and I think it applies to all these situations because you can ask. There's so many people that you can ask. However, in this particular case, I'm actually going to back her up because I've seen a lot of commenters say, no way, I don't believe it that she didn't know what a walkabout was. They for sure prepared her and all this kind of stuff. I don't think that she's saying that she didn't know what a walkabout was by the time she went to the walkabout. I think she's saying that initially she didn't know what a walkabout was. At first, when she was told you have to go do a walkabout, she didn't know what it was. At least in this documentary, to me, that's what it sounds like she's saying. And then certain elements of it were explained to her. It would be very silly for her to say that by the time she went on the walkabout, she didn't know what it was, because first of all, Harry literally says that, he explained to her what he did know. So to a certain degree, they did have a conversation about it. But second of all,
Help will always be given at Hogwarts to those who ask for it.
she knows that we know that it would be unreasonable for her to not ask someone, hey, what's a walkabout? What do I do? Now, what's interesting about this statement is that as soon as she says it, we get a confirmation glance from Prince Harry, but not towards her, towards the viewer, towards us, more specifically, the director or whoever's sitting behind the camera. So he turns to her and looks over, and we see two other things at the same time. One is this sort of tight smile, which is not uncommon throughout this interview. He kind of has this polite smile. I wouldn't expect this big, joyous smile, but there's also a slow blink. And a slow blink is something we often do when we're having a hard time facing something. It's kind of like we brace ourselves, and it could happen with irritation or with an unpleasant thought. I think what's going on in his head is he's going, oof, I'm not so sure people are gonna buy that you didn't know what a walkabout was. And at the same time, he's turning to see what the response to that statement is. And I think that's why he immediately corrects or elaborates what she said by saying, yeah, no, I mean, I told her what I knew from my experience, but there's still some stuff that I didn't know. And what I found really interesting about that is he kind of drags out a very simple statement. The statement is, I didn't know how a woman is supposed to dress. That's it. But he goes, I didn't know the style and, what a woman or how a woman is supposed to dress and all that sort of stuff. So what is he really saying there? Style and how a woman is supposed to dress more or less means the same thing. Had he said one or the other, we would have understood what he meant. And then he goes, all that sort of stuff. What sort of stuff? He's kind of making it seem like he had all these gaps, there's all these things he didn't know, but it seems to me like all he didn't know was how a woman is supposed to dress. But again,
help will always be given at Hogwarts, Harry, to those who ask for it.
Couldn't have said it better myself. There's a ton of people he could have asked. He could have asked anyone in his family. He could have asked his sister-in-law, Princess Catherine. They could have asked any of the employees at the palace. So yeah, there's something about this that I'm like, every now and then they talk about how like they were clueless in certain situations or she was clueless in certain situations. And I just kind of feel like if they wanted that information, they could have easily found it. All right, now we're going to move on and look at some doozies and some real emotional moments that are very telling. But before we do me a huge favor, hit that subscribe button, turn those notifications on for more behavioral analysis and practical psychology content.
The thing with unconscious bias is it's actually no one's fault. But once it's been pointed out or identified within yourself, you then need to make it right. It's education, it's awareness, and it's a constant work in progress for everybody, including me,
British headline writers have been salivating today.
There's a giant bit of irony right there in the beginning where he starts off by saying it's no one's fault. So that's what he said, first statement, unconscious bias is no one's fault. But then in the second article that they chose to put this in the documentary from The Guardian, under the big headline, it says, Prince blames royal upbringing for prior lack of insight. So if it's no one's fault, how are you blaming someone? Don't we usually blame fault on someone? And that's why I feel like maybe they're highlighting in red the big writing so we won't read the fine print, because red really gets our attention. So maybe they're trying to draw our attention away from that, but like, why is it there? Why did you put that there? You could have just as easily had the headline, and it really contradicts what he's saying, because if you had unconscious bias, then it stands to reason that they all had unconscious bias. So how can you blame them for it if they're unconscious of it? They didn't know, so how are they going to teach you? Looking at the body language on that one, when he says it's education, it's awareness, we see two things. One is this open gesture. And open is usually quite comfortable, and in this case, there's almost this giving element to it. And it's not the first time he does this, and I believe that awareness is something he thinks it's his moral duty to give to people. At the very same time, we see a quick eyebrow flash. The eyebrows go up and down. The research on this gesture shows us that in most cases, eyebrow flashing means either emphasis, like you emphasize something, social connection or approval. You see someone you recognize and you go, hey, what's going on? Eyebrows go up, you're showing good intention. And the third one is surprise. When something surprises you, those eyebrows go up. And in this case, I think it's the second one. It's social approval. He wants to give awareness and he's seeking approval for this mission of his. Right there at the end, we get this symphony of eye flutters. Like, it's a lot of eye flutters, not just one quick burst, but like it goes on for a little bit. And eye flutters is something that happens when we're trying to process information. So whether we're trying to get our own words together or someone says something that we're trying to register, trying to sort out, we see those eye flutters. It's also something we see when someone's trying to process emotion, like whether you've made them angry or they're about to cry. Sometimes we see it quite a bit when we're trying to process emotion. And that might be what it is in this case, because you could see there's quite a bit of passion behind this. And I know that the music is accentuating it and making it worse, but the way he's talking about this, there's a seriousness here. And I think he's just trying to sort through this emotion that he's feeling when he talks about unconscious bias. There's something about this that blew my mind. This documentary is really good at hiding stuff. They've been editing left, right, and center, putting pictures and montage and B-roll to hide, I think, certain moments of awkward body language. But in this particular case, after he's done talking, they keep the camera on him for another 6 seconds. And at the end, he has either a burp or a hiccup. I can't really tell because when they're that subtle, they're interchangeable. But we definitely see this little bit of a pop as his Adam's apple jumps and his hand comes right up to his mouth like this because he knows there was something happened, either a hiccup or a burp. Why would they keep that? Of all the things they've cut out, of all the things they've edited, why is this there? Nobody in editing saw that and said, maybe we should cut this, especially because it's not essential. He's done talking, he made his point. I have no clue why they kept that in there. None.
Prince Harry's choice to wear a Nazi uniform earlier this month to a private party has caused outrage.
It was one of the biggest mistakes of my life. I felt so ashamed afterwards. All I wanted to do was make it right. I sat down and spoke to the chief rabbi in London, which had a profound impact on me. I went to Berlin and spoke to a Holocaust survivor. I could have just ignored it and got on and probably made the same mistakes over and over again in my life.
There is a lot going on there. As he says, I felt so ashamed afterwards. The first is a slow blink, which is something that happens when we're having a hard time dealing with something or facing something, an unpleasant image. The second thing we see is mouth blocking as his thumb comes up and blocks his mouth. Now, as children, whenever we say something that we're not supposed to say, like a swear word or a secret, very commonly, both our hands shoot right up to our mouth. Or if we're being asked something that we don't want to say, we very often block our mouth like this. As we get older, we become much more subtle at it, and you might see this kind of thing, or in this case, this kind of thing. Third, we see the head shaking as he's speaking like this, pretty consistently, and this is one of the most misunderstood gestures in all of body language. A lot of people out there think, oh, he did this while he was talking, he's for sure lying. This most commonly means disbelief, disagreement, disapproval, or disappointment. So what does this mean? Do these behaviors together indicate that he's being deceptive? Well, it could mean that, because eye blocking can very well be something that you're having a hard time facing, like something that you just said that isn't entirely true. Mouth blocking, once again, when we say something that we're not supposed to say or we're trying to keep something in, could be very consistent with, no, shouldn't have said that, should not have said that, that's not entirely true. And finally, that, head shaking could be disagreement. He doesn't agree with what he just said because it's incorrect. So it could be deception, but it could also simply be shame, which is very consistent with that cluster as well. So the eye blocking could just be he doesn't want to face what he did, that's shame. Then the mouth blocking, which could be consistent with things at the time that he may have done or said that he is regretting, he's feeling shame towards. And finally, disapproval or disappointment in himself as his head is going back and forth like this. And that cluster could very much indicate that he does genuinely feel shame towards this. So could be deceptive, could be shame. Let me know in the comments, what do you think? The other thing that bugs me a little bit is he's saying what he did in action to make it right, but not in thought, not in emotion. So he's saying, I went to speak to the chief rabbi, which had a profound effect on me. So I guess we're getting a little bit of a glimpse there. And then he says, I went to Berlin to talk to a Holocaust survivor. So I did this, I went there, I did that. Okay, but what did that, you say it had a profound effect. What effect? Tell us. Walk us through it. What was the conversation about? What did you realize? What did this survivor tell you? You're putting all this importance on these authorities on the subject. You went to Berlin to speak to a Holocaust survivor. I would love to know what he said to you and what made you change and go, okay, yeah, no, that was wrong. You're just telling us what you did, but not what you realized. What's the thought behind it? I would like to know that. Then the cherry on top of this sundae that's just kind of irritating me a little is he goes, I could have just ignored it. I could have just gone on. Could you? Could you really? I don't think he could. I mean, you're a member of the royal family. You're making headlines for this. I don't think, first of all, that you could go on without the media decimating you. And I don't think you can ignore it and go on because your family probably wouldn't allow that. They want to be able to tell the media, no, look, he's doing this. It's regretful. I don't think you could have just casually gone on. And I think he knows that because he throws a little probably in there. which again is a low confidence word. So yeah, I don't think you could have just ignored it and gone on. I don't think that's a possibility given who you are.
Working and living with normal people, and I fully appreciate that my life is not normal, certainly has an effect on you, right?
Whew. He is really good at auto-correcting or kind of elaborating on what he needs to. And sometimes he does it for himself, sometimes he does it for Meghan, where he says a statement and he immediately knows that, okay, there's going to be a way to spin this, I better correct that. And this is such a great example of that, because right here in the beginning he goes, you know, that he had this experience with normal people. And if he just ended it there, we might look at it and go, oh, what do you mean normal people? Like, oh, excuse me, Mr. Fancy Pants. Like, we're just normal people now? Like, it kind of, we would think is demeaning. But what he does there is he corrects it and he goes, you know, I fully appreciate that my life isn't normal. So with that elaboration, he kind of makes us go, oh, right, okay, it wasn't demeaning to us. You're just saying that your life is so far out of the ordinary that ours is kind of normal. It's not an elite thing, like you're above and we're just normal. Then as he says, and I fully appreciate that my life is not normal, we get two very distinct shrugs.
And I fully appreciate that my life is not normal.
Let's talk about shrugs. The best research on shrugging was conducted at the Université Paris-Nanterre by Camille Debras. And she talked about all the components of shrugging and isolated all the different meanings, and it's fascinating. So the first thing we know about shrugs is that it is a quick upward movement, and it could engage several parts of the body. Very often the shoulders are involved. Very often the hands are involved as we go like this. Mouth shrugging, which is this. The eyebrows are often involved as those pop up. And quite commonly the head tilts as well as we shrug. And we see all kinds of combinations and variations of these. Like you could see the shoulders and the hands like this, or the shoulders, the mouth, and the eyebrows like that. So any combination of these constitutes a shrug. Now, in my experience, I've very rarely seen someone just shrug with the hands. You might get this kind of thing of exasperation, but it's not necessarily a shrug. So I very rarely see hand shrugs, and the eyebrows too. I rarely see a shrug, which is just the eyebrows, because that'll be a lot closer to an eyebrow flash, which has a lot of other meanings. So what is the meaning of a shrug? When do we shrug? Is it when we're lying? Is it when we're being honest? It's actually a lot more nuanced than that. So Camille Debras, in her research, divided all shrugs into 3 categories, and in those categories, there are subsections. But basically, what it comes down to is this. A shrug denotes a lack of something. I don't know, I don't care, I don't know what to say, I don't have the words, I don't have the answer, I don't have the authority. So you're lacking something. Now, I will leave a link in the description to Camille Debras' entire paper. It's all there, all the details, all the numbers, all the factors, links and references to all kinds of other research specifically on the shrug, and it's really fascinating stuff. To elaborate on this, ex-FBI interrogator Joe Navarro, who is one of the most successful authors and speakers on the subject of body language worldwide, talks about the difference between a shrug with both shoulders or a shrug with just one shoulder. And he says that in his experience, a shrug with both shoulders is an actual lack of knowledge, but a one-sided shoulder shrug typically is a little more deliberate and denotes a lack of confidence. Like if I'm less confident about something that I'm saying, I might get that shoulder to pop up, but I'm not so confident. With confident shrugs, both pop up. So what are the shrugs that we're seeing with Prince Harry here? Well, they both happen during the statement, and I fully appreciate that my life is not normal. And they both have the shoulders involved. Both shoulders, both times, pop up and down. They both have the eyebrows involved. The first one has the head kind of do that sideways thing. The second one, not so much. And the hands, I can't really tell. Between the two, we kind of see the hands go upwards like this, but it's too zoomed in to see where the hands are. But it doesn't matter. Even without the hands, we have more than enough to know that these are shrugs. Even just the shoulders would be enough. But what do they mean? Well, I could say with pretty high confidence that both of those are epistemic shrugs. More specifically, saying, I don't know what else to say, what to add to this. We both already know that this is true. So basically he's going, and I fully appreciate that my life is not normal. Like we all know this. I think it's pretty clear that my life isn't normal.
My 10 years in the army,
It gave me the lived experience that other members of my family wouldn't have had. 2 tours in Afghanistan, flying Apache helicopters on a military base means that you grow up pretty fast. Geez, I went to war twice.
In that second clip, we're seeing a shrug, but it's very different than the shrugs we looked at earlier. Earlier with the shrugs, it was, a lot of stuff going on. We saw those both shoulders pop up. We saw the eyebrows go up. In one of them, the head was involved. In this one, I can't tell for sure because it's really zoomed in, but it definitely looks like a one-sided shoulder shrug. It looks like that left shoulder is going up and we're really not seeing much movement on the right at all. And if we go back to Joe Navarro, one shoulder indicates a lack of confidence in what he's saying. So when he's talking about this lived experience that he had that his family wouldn't have had, it's very possible that he's not that confident. He's saying it, but he's not that confident. It's not just the fact that it's this one-sided shoulder shrug, it's that it looks very different from when he shrugs elsewhere with a lot more body parts involved in that shrug. And that leads me to a question. I will never ever take away an ounce of respect that I have for anyone who serves in the military. So I want to preface this by saying that. What I have though is a question, and I don't know the answer to this, but a lot of the viewers might. Did Prince Harry have a quote-unquote normal military experience? I would assume, and again, without taking anything away from him, I would assume maybe not. I would assume because this is the literal prince, that he would be very protected. There would be people that, because first of all, not only because he's a prince, but he's a very big asset. For any enemy of the country, I would assume that they would be very protective of him, that they wouldn't really, because he even said that he, drove that helicopter around the base. So that was interesting for him to say that, around the military base. So I'm wondering, was he ever really in dangerous situations? Was he very guarded? Also, in that whole clip, notice his tone, notice his cadence. It's worlds different from when he's stressed or unconfident or talking at the same time as Meghan. In this case, there's no hesitation, there's none of that stammering, none of that falling apart. Even when there's moments where he pauses, whether it's for effect or whether it's to kind of think of what he's going to say next, and we're not seeing any of that. There's a lot of confidence here with this. I think his experience in the army actually gives them quite a bit of confidence. This whole mood is very different, and at the end, we end with something just beautiful with the body language as he goes, geez, I went to war twice. So he's got his arm up here as he's saying that, and it's very rare that we illustrate up here. Illustrators are gestures we make to emphasize what we're saying or to illustrate what we're saying, and it's so rare that we do it up here. Sometimes when we're angry or, we might get it for a little bit, but most of the time, these gestures are in this area. Now, I get that his arm's on an armrest, so it's kind of like but still, it's odd to have, and kind of like the way he just flicks it outwards, it goes, geez, and then that flutter, so it's kind of like, come on guys, I went to war twice. And it's funny because Harry has this sass that comes out sometimes. We talked about it in the first video, and I'm totally seeing it here. That's a very sassy kind of way to end this confident speech about his time in the military, and it just got my attention. It was just interesting.
Women don't need to find a voice. They have a voice. They need to feel empowered to use it, and people need to be encouraged to listen. And I think right now in the climate that we're seeing with so many campaigns, with Me Too, there is no better time than to really continue to shine a light on women feeling empowered.
It's important to remember the royal family in the UK and the causes that they champion are deliberately non-controversial.
I didn't know that would be taboo to talk about. To me, it was just topical.
Okay, so we've talked on the channel about how Meghan has certain mannerisms that rub people the wrong way, and there are people who just dislike her. And if you're one of those for whatever reason, that's totally fine. And there are people who really like Meghan for a lot of the things she's done, and that's totally fine as well. There are ways we can have adult conversations. And in the last video, I spent quite a bit of time picking apart certain behaviors that she had and saying she's hiding something here, or this feels a little overdone or fake. So in this clip, let's give credit where credit is due. First of all, I think what she said on that stage right in the beginning is lovely, and I completely agree that we should be making efforts to amplify the voices of those who matter. I think that's a great point. And there's a lot of people who criticize Meghan for these efforts where they say, oh, she's just doing it to get praise and to lift herself up, fine, I don't care. If she's going to say nice things like that and people are going to listen, I don't care if it lifts her up, because if it also creates awareness, I'm totally fine with that. And while we're on the subject, I believe her. I believe that. So I've pointed out things I didn't believe. Like I didn't believe that she had no preparation to, before she met the Queen. This I believe. I believe that she did not know that she wasn't supposed to talk about Me Too on that stage. And there's a couple of reasons I believe that. First, if we compare this denial to the other denials, the other ones were very overdone, over-dramatized. She really elaborated. In this one, she just goes, I didn't know. I just talked about it like, because it was topical. There's also a quick flash of confusion, when she goes, I didn't know the eyebrows go down like this right in the beginning. And this is consistent with anger, but it's also consistent with confusion or concentration. So, and it flashes. I know she's an actress and she could do certain things deliberately, but that quick flash like that didn't feel deliberate. A lot of time when she's doing things deliberately, it feels overdone and deliberate. This wasn't one of those. Another reason I believe it is because when she's on that stage and she brings it up, there's no sign of stress. There's not her looking around to see, oh, did it have an impact? There's no kind of mischievous anything. Like there's nothing that seems like she was doing it to provoke, or that she was doing it to get a reaction, or that she was doing it knowing she's not supposed to. Nothing. She just said it on that stage and her body language was pretty consistent. So all these things convinced me that I believe she didn't know she wasn't supposed to talk about Me Too on that stage. Now, as much as in that clip there are things that I like and that I believe, there is something that is noteworthy and not so great. And it's the fact that at the end, for me, she said that the reason she brought it up is because it was topical. That's the reason, it was topical. Shouldn't the reason be that you're passionate about this, that it's important to you? I would have much preferred an answer along the lines of, I just brought it up because it's something that I was consumed with at the time, that I was thinking about, that I was working on. When she says it's topical, it leads me to believe that she brought it up because it was a hot topic. Like people be like, ooh, Meghan talked about Me Too, let's go listen to that. So for the critics who say that she likes attention and she does things to get it, I could see how this would line up with that.
I have to ask, did anyone have to teach you how to do the wave?
That's not a thing. You just sort of watch it and go, okay, I guess that's what, I don't know. I guess you don't want to wave like an American, like, everything is just smaller.
All right, this one's gonna be really quick. First and foremost, I would love to know in the beginning what caused that gesture that we're seeing, because it comes back, she's blocking like this. So it's consistent with shame almost, or embarrassment. We've got the hand up here. We do this like when we wanna kind of hide when we're feeling embarrassed. She's going no with her head. She's got this little awkward smile, but there's no way for me to know because I don't know what led to that gesture. I don't know what they were talking about when that happened. It went right from the clip of her waving to that, so I don't know. And then at the end, she does something that's a very Meghan thing to do, where she goes, you don't want to wave like an American, like, hi. Everything is smaller. Like, I'm genuinely curious. Does everyone who lives in America wave like that? And does everyone who lives in the UK not wave like that? I get what she's trying to say, that generally speaking, there's a subtlety, there's more subtlety to Europe. And in America, it's glitz and glamour and over-sensationalized. I get it. But she does these things where, like, you throw every American under the bus by going, the American way to wave is, hi. And I get that she's trying to be funny and self-deprecating and relatable. And I get that she's probably trying to compliment the UK by saying, things are really outrageous in the States or in the UK. It's a little smaller. But these generalizations tend to alienate people, because I could see an American watching that and going, I don't wave like that. And I can imagine someone from the UK saying, we're not smaller. Why would you say we're smaller? And I think another subconscious contrast in our head is that for someone who's always talking about prejudice and is talking about these big things that she's trying to champion, it seems inconsistent that she would have these generalizations, that all Americans are loud and obnoxious and all Englishmen and Englishwomen are smaller. It seems inconsistent for someone who's trying to create awareness that there are biases out there, which is basically a generalization. So is this an unconscious bias? That you think all Americans are one way and all Englishmen and women are a different way? I think some people catch on to that discrepancy.
On the day of our wedding, it's like I went into a really calm space. I don't know how I was so calm, I look back at it, how was I so calm? I knew that when I got to the actual castle, I mean, how funny is that to say, when we got to the castle for my wedding, that there'd be tons of people. What I didn't know is people would be lining both sides of the street. I mean, this was a 15-minute drive. I think my mom and her both like, what is going on? Look at all these people.
Okay, so here we have her talking about the day of her wedding. And I get it. We see brides talk about the day of their wedding, and it's overdramatic and it's emotional. So I get some of this. There's a few things that caught my attention. One was that gesture right in the beginning when she was talking about how calm she was, where she goes like this. This is a very odd gesture. For the hand to come up like this, hand coming to the face is very common. But typically it's palm inwards, and it might go there to scratch or rub or self-soothe, adapt, pacifier like this. But this gesture is so consistent with like that damsel in distress, that lady in the cartoons. And it's and it happens weird, like slowly comes up like this as she's talking. It's so bizarre. And again, last week we talked about Meghan's mannerisms, these exaggerated gestures and the inflections in her tone. And we talked about the psychology as to why it rubs certain people the wrong way. And this is just another great example of that. And again, I want to say this, there's nothing inherently wrong with it. It doesn't speak to someone's character. It doesn't say that they are fake. It's just to some people, it feels fake. Some people don't mind it. Some people actually find it engaging. Some people talk like that naturally. There's nothing wrong with it. I'm just saying it innately irritates certain people. Then she's talking about going to the castle, and she stops to say,
how funny is that to say, when we got to the castle for my wedding?
Here's the thing. If you think it's funny to say you went to the castle for your wedding, don't say it. First of all, it's a video. It's your video. You can easily say, can we just retake that and use a different word? Second, we tell the stories of our weddings again and again and again. We develop a kind of script for it. Had you said castle at some point and actually thought, how funny is that? How weird is that to say that? You would have changed the word. I went to the venue. I went to the wedding. So in this case, I think it's once again that attempt from her to be relatable, because to most of us, getting married in a castle, that's crazy. So she's saying it on purpose. Let's be honest. She chose to say that word, and then she's paused to be like, oh, how weird is that? Because once again, I'm just like you. It's weird to me too. But then you just could have not said it. I also do want to note that at the end, when she's talking about all the people that she saw there and the expression she had with her mom, we're seeing happiness, we're seeing excitement. And again, we talk about this a lot with Meghan too, where she likes attention, she likes cameras. Now, I do want to amend something that I said last week, because I don't think I was very thorough. I said that of course she likes the camera, she's an actress. Not all actors, not all actresses love or crave the camera. A lot of them don't. What I should have said is that the fact that she pursued a career in Hollywood as an actress, and several other things about her personality, like the fact that she loves to get on stage and speak, the fact that she has certain mannerisms that draw attention to herself. There are a lot more clues than the simple fact that she's an actress that would indicate that she does like attention. A lot of actors are introverted. They, want to do their job, and then they're not interested in that camera. With Meghan, more consistently, we see that she's quite comfortable around it, as she should be. It's part of who she is. It's totally fine. But we're getting some evidence of that right here.
The lies, that's one thing. Kind of get used to that when you live within this family. But what they were doing to her and the effect that it was having on her, like enough of the pain, enough of the suffering. And the fact that it got to that stage, I felt angry and ashamed. I didn't deal with it particularly well. I'd been trained to worry more about what are people going to think if we don't go to this event, we're going to be late. And looking back on it now, I hate myself for it.
A lot of interesting behavioral stuff there. Once again, we have this more, he's talking about something very stressful here, but we're getting much less of that stammering and hesitation and that kind of nervous stuff he does, but body language stuff, wow, a couple of crazy things. Actually, before we get to the body language, right in the beginning when he's talking about, that enough of the pain, the suffering, it's crazy because if you take that initial clip, that first clip, and out of context, you make me listen to it, I would not know if he's talking about Meghan or Diana. I wouldn't know. I wouldn't know if he's talking about his wife or his mom. And he often draws parallels between the two, and I think what's happening here is he's drawing on that frustration, what he felt for not being able to save his mom. Now, a lot of people, when it comes to Harry, talk about Oedipus complex, which is a concept in psychoanalysis that Sigmund Freud actually came up with. And it's the idea that men want to romantically be with their mom or someone exactly like their mom, but that's only half of it. A lot of people throw that around, for Harry, because he draws all these comparisons. He basically wanted to find someone like his mom because he couldn't protect her. He's trying to protect Meghan, and it's very valid. Now, what people forget about Oedipus complex is that having romantic feelings for the mother or someone like the mother is only half of the equation. The other half of Oedipus complex is having strong negative feelings for the father and resentments towards the father. And when you think about it that way, it only strengthens this Oedipus complex theory when it comes to Prince Harry. There could very well be parts of him who go, my father didn't do what he had to protect my mom. So he kind of feels negative thoughts towards his father and what his father represents, and he wants to separate from that and be different and protect his wife, who is a projection of his mom. So that all comes back to this. He's talking about Meghan, and I'm getting a lot of feelings about the way he would have felt about his mom, protecting his mom, and what he couldn't do or what his father couldn't do in that situation. When he says enough of the pain, the suffering, we feel that. This really looks like a man to me who's at his rope's end, who's not going to tolerate this. And to really drive that home for me is we see that exhale of exasperation, where we see the shoulders drop as he goes,
enough of the suffering.
Is when we've given up, we're exasperated, just enough, and we see it in that exhale. When he says, I felt angry, we see a couple of important things. One, it's not a big exaggerated anger, but we definitely see those eyebrows go down, which is very consistent with anger, but also that eye block. He closes his eyes and he nods as he says that. He is angry with himself. He doesn't want to face himself and how he acted. And this to me confirms that he does eye block or slow blink, which are very much related, when he has a hard time facing something. So we can go back and look at some of the moments earlier in this video and just confirm that this is something he does. When he's having a hard time facing something, he's angry with himself, doesn't want to face the way he behaved, those eyes are closing. But nothing beats what happens there at the end when he says, I hate myself for it. Because we see a smile, and a lot of people say, oh, he's smiling, it's positive. No, smiles can happen in embarrassment, self-awareness, so he smiles there. What's interesting about this is the way he breaks away from the smile. It's really fast and easy to miss, but the left side breaks away first, while the right side stays up. This is not something that's seen very commonly, and it's not something that's easy to fake. I'm sure if you sit there right now and really focus and try to do it in silence, some people would be able to do it, but in most cases it's very difficult to have that little smile and break away just one side without the other one automatically coming down, especially mid-conversation like this. So what does this mean? It means that his smile turns into the expression of contempt. That is a classic expression of contempt. One corner of the mouth, whether it's this or this going up, while the other one doesn't, is classic contempt. So I absolutely believe right there when he's saying that he hated himself for it, that he's actually feeling contemptuous towards himself.
We were in this bubble where everything is controlled by them. Couldn't even text my friends a photo.
Yeah.
If you can't do this, you can't. Okay. And you do as you're told, but your world just becomes more and more like this.
So in last week's analysis, we talked about the contrast between Harry and Meghan and what the camera means to them. Basically, really quick summary, that for Harry, they've just kind of always been there his whole life. So he tends to be normal in front of him. Yes, sometimes it's paparazzi telling him stand like this, do this, but also throughout his normal life, they've always been there. So for him, it's not really a cue to put anything on. For her, as an experienced actress, the camera is a cue to put on a role, to go to a certain role. And we feel that difference, we feel that contrast. All this to say they have a very different demeanor in front of the camera. He's a little more to the point, a little more direct, a little more himself, a little more subtle. She's, got more exaggerated mannerisms and inflections in her voice, a little more dramatic. But I never felt that contrast more than in that switch. And we didn't see the whole thing here, so I urge you to go watch episode 4 if you haven't, because he talks about all this dramatic stuff, and there's a seriousness to his tone, and we can feel it. There's moments where it's really impactful. And it goes on for quite some time, and then it switches over to her, and we get this, and immediately you feel that shift, where she's kind of dramatizing how she felt. Like, I can't even text my friends a photo. Pause. Okay. And it's, again, I think it's that contrast that really gets to people. Because if she was like on an episode of, I don't know, Real Housewives of something with a bunch more people from this culture who speak this way, who have these inflections, I don't think too many people would notice. It would just work. But I think it's in contrast with him that, and especially here, you see that shift and you go, oh boy, okay, there it is. And again, there's nothing wrong with either way. It's just different people respond to different things. And so I guess I'll end the analysis where I ended the last one, because it's really important for me to get this message across, that whatever you feel about them, it's totally fine. I could see how her mannerisms and that extraness can rub people the wrong way. I could see how there's certain things in his behavior, like sometimes we feel like we're not getting the full picture, where, you know, some people get irritated by that. And then there are other people who think, you know, we should mind our own business, give them a chance, they seem happy together, let them live their life, and if they want to do certain things certain ways, it's completely up to them. And I get both angles. I understand both angles. It doesn't mean that we have to be vicious towards each other. I am so impressed, by the way, with the types of conversations I saw in the comments last week, where there were a lot of conversations where you disagreed, but it wasn't demeaning, and it wasn't this polarized like, no, they're awful, you're an idiot, you don't know anything. No. I didn't see a lot of that. And I thank you so much for that, because I think this is a case where your priorities and your perception will change exactly what you think of them. I don't think there's an absolute truth here. I think it depends on how you're looking at it. So there it was. I hope you enjoyed it. There was a lot of really great stuff with the nonverbal communications going on in this one. Let me know in the comments what you thought. And next week we are covering episodes 5 and 6. So I hope to see you there. Thanks for watching.